Greetings, everybody. This is your man, Nicholas Shephard from the Shephard Family Enterprise Business Administration and Information Systems Consultants. And today, what I'm going to talk about is restructuring your mindset so that you can prepare yourself for better business opportunities. Okay, so this is how to start building a business mindset. The first thing I would like to get into basically is there are a lot of African Americans out there who are still confused about the situation of why should they invest or coordinate some type of business activity with small seedling business minded individuals or entrepreneurs so that they can get started to help create a strong economic base for the communities in which they live. As we all know, most of our funds that we spend never returns to the urban communities, and we always complain about our school systems, markets not being available, or the food source is not available for our communities. And the reason being is that most African American professionals or the working class families that are in a position where they can assist or identify the fact that there are problems in their communities and help these individuals to get on track so that they can build a strong economic base in the communities. These individuals just aren't doing it. Now, I was talking to an African American woman and I was explaining to her there are a lot of working class African Americans that are not living in African American communities. And they say that the reason being is that they are afraid of once they leave to go to work, then there will be African American urban youth or criminals or those who participate in criminal activity will victimize their homes because of the fact that they just don't have the respect for the African American community that's trying to invest their time and money and effort in that society. The thing is, if you are working, okay, if you structure a strong child mentality in these communities at a very young age and train these children to respect those who are in that community, contributing to the well-being in the future of the economic base, to stabilize the society in our communities so that we can create an atmosphere where these children can come back and show their great grandchildren and their great grandchildren where they came from. Okay. I went back to Detroit, okay, and almost brought tears to my eyes because the community that I was raised in, which was basically a German Jewish environment at the time, in the Jewish environment, is totally different. It has been destroyed by various facets of criminal organizations, which, as a young man, I took part in as well. But there are individuals out there or persons that were involved in this exploitation of the communities goes back to these communities and are working with the individuals and youth to bring a more positive mindset in these areas, which is outstanding. That being said, I had mentioned before, how can we restructure the mindset at a seedling level of our African American young adults, family members, so that in the future we don't have to go through the things that we went through in the past. As you know, we live in a system of psychological and control, whereas that you have different facets of organizations out there that's very much trained to steer the mindset of any culture. It don't matter they're European, Asian, Spanish descendants, African descendants, anything. It depends on what they want. Okay, and I studied this, right? In the military, it's called psychological warfare, where we would actually put certain facet of people in certain areas, and then this put propaganda out, and we would continue to do that until we see changes, and then we work with those individuals who accept those changes, and we empower them to push those changes into the children. We as African Americans can do the same thing in our communities. You know, there's always going to be some type of criminal activity in our community. So the main thing is that it's under control, right? What I mean by under control, you're not going to stop all criminal. There's criminal activity. There's criminal activity, and let me explain to you what I mean by criminal activity. I'm not talking about extreme. All right, criminal activity in our minds is based on going to prison, right? All criminal activity isn't prison worthy, isn't even worthy to be approached by law enforcement officers, or to get a ticket for, or to go to jail for, or to be even have to be sued, anything, right? We talk about criminal activity that is accepted in our communities, and people of the African descent, or African American, or Negroes, or blacks are susceptible to these environments. And what happens is that they tend to partake in these activities, whether it's just, like, say, buying things, right, that the government that's controlling our society, or financial institutions that's controlling our communities, do not agree with, right? So if that is happening, and you are partaking in these activities, and you're raising your children to be aggressive towards another person instead of communicating with people, then what you're doing, you're recreating things that we have been exploited for. All right. I was talking to some individuals about in the past. I was talking to this individual, and they was telling me, well, how can we change the mindset of our youths? And I explained to them, we have to change the mindset of our African American women. Now, I'm not talking about every African American woman, because all African American women aren't subject to these behaviors. Some African American women are very supportive of the African American man, and they identify the exploitation that the African American man has been through by the European society or other cultures to put us in the position where we are today. So what can the African American women that are blind by the fact that they just don't know? They think they know, but they don't know. The first thing is that most African American women, okay, they have a power that the European persons or society have given them to keep the African American man in such a position whereas that we cannot dictate how our families are raised. This particular person was saying, well, there aren't any good African American men out there. You can't trust. I'm not letting no so-called black man tell me what to do. These black men, so you can't be trusted. They this and that. I said, okay, but these African American men has mothers. Where did they learn this from? See, these African American women do not want to take responsibility for the mindset these young children have, grow into young adults, they grow into older adults with the same mindset that was instilled in their minds by their who? Mothers. A lot of times mothers, African American mothers in urban communities, they get themselves involved with men that will protect them, right? In these environments, most of these men that protect them are what? Young men that are involved in criminal activities or know of people in criminal activity that can give them the support or the protection they need so that they can do the things that they're doing, like, which keep most African women at such a low level, whereas that they become a majority in these communities. So it's accepted for children to grow up under the welfare of their mothers, thinking that this is okay behavior. Mothers don't treat these mothers in these communities, doesn't respect the African American man. And this took generations. This is not something that just happened within the last week. Some of these things happened before the individuals who are listening to this video, before they were born. Some of this information was instilled in these African American women's mind before their grandmothers, okay, were born, right? Or when their grandmothers were little girls, which they didn't have the mindset to understand what was going on. I'm gonna give you an example, okay? I was born in the 60s, 1962, right? And of course, as time went on, I seen a lot of things take place in the African American community. I seen the transition between the Europeans that was living in the area. They moved out. I've seen the African Americans from the South seeking employment. I've seen how they moved in. They moved in. They brought sometimes 20 members of their family down to work in the plants. They lived in these rental apartments. They really didn't care about this rental property because their whole concept, their whole ideal of it, I'm going to work in this plant, save my money, stay here until I retire, okay, or stay here until I can buy a home, stay in this home until I retire, and then take my money I save, my pension, and then move back down south. A lot of them did that, okay? So they didn't care about the North. They didn't care about the communities they lived in because they knew that they were going back down south. They took all their families back down south every summer, and they stayed for weeks, okay? Sometimes a couple of months throughout the summer, until school started back. So during this time, okay, you understand, I was born in 62. Vietnam was going on, okay? A lot of young men were going to the war. A lot of young men was exposed to a lot of different things. So what happened was that you have these young men coming back from Vietnam, okay, going back to their high schools and impregnating these young girls that was probably in 11th or 10th grade, right? So you talk about 16-year-old girls getting pregnant by 19-year-old boys that was coming back from Vietnam. Some of them were in their 20s, but a lot of them was like 18, 19 years old. They stayed for a year and came back. They came back 19 years of age. They didn't go back, right? And they went to work in automotive industry, okay? And during that time, they had this thing called GA, right? Which they was giving a lot of the men coming back from Vietnam, right? This assistance to help them get reestablished back into the community. Now, this was going on in Detroit. I don't know what's going on all over. I'm talking about what's going on in my environment, what I was exposed to. And so they had the welfare system that was designed for mothers without the men in the family. And then they had the GA that was given to men, right, coming back from the war so they can get themselves reestablished in the community that they left from the war. Okay. Now, what they found out is that a lot of these young men was on heroin. So the men that was on this GA, they was taking this money, right? And they was buying heroin. and it became such a problem that they was taking this money and wasn't taking care of their families. They weren't doing anything. They weren't working. They were doing it. They was taking this money and using it on drugs that the government actually cut it out. Now they say a lot of different things so that what I'm saying. There wasn't anything in place to help these men, and other guys went to the VA so that I'm a vet, right? I'm a military vet. And there's certain things the VA this not I'm not saying they're not qualified to do. They don't have the funding, okay, to assist these people. They give them a block of medical care, right? They compound them with this information, this medical care, and then they send them back out the door, right? So you have these young men impregnating these girls. During that time in the 70s, they were allowing young women in high school, if they get pregnant at the age of 16, the government was giving, or the state government was allowing these young girls to move into apartments at a very young age of 16, right? And they were paying for everything and giving them food stamps and medical care for them and their children until the child was damn near 15, right? So you got a young lady that's teenager, 16. She has her own apartment, right? Who do you think is going to be in those apartments? The guys, the older guys, maybe some guys came back, you know what I'm saying? But these young girls, they get money from the state. They don't need these older guys, so that really, you know what I'm saying? So who's coming over there? Younger teens from the high school, or they're people in the neighborhood. And what they were doing when they went to skip school, they go to these young girls' homes, right? And they hang out, and they have parties. They do all this stuff like that. Which these young people didn't have the discipline of family life, right? These young children was having young children, right? And the parents of these, the parent or the father of this child was probably a Vietnam vet, right? That was ripping and running the streets, right? And this woman, this young girl may have gotten pregnant by another teenager that had the second child by a child, right? You know what I'm saying? And now they have a family of children in a group of children trying to guide each other, all right? This whole atmosphere is what contributed to the way women think today. Women started saying that men aren't no good, right? Men is no good, they cheat, this and that. All of this stemmed from that particular time period. And it perpetuated through time. It went from 1970 up to the 1990s, right? So all the things that was going on in the black community during that time, and I'm not quite sure what was going on in a lot of the states and the urban communities too. They probably had their own structure, state structure of how they was, helping young girls that was getting pregnant. But these young girls raised their children without the ability to guide them to a deeper understanding. Like, some of these girls dropped out of school. I'm not saying all of them was not smart in school. Some of them didn't have the basic education. You understanding of education, like math, like math, reading, science. They didn't have that, and they was getting pregnant, and they dropped out of school because when they pregnant, they can't go back to school. They had this. They just sent them to this school. They just called it the Stevenson Building in Detroit, where they sent a lot of young girls that were pregnant. They would go there, and this is where they would stay, and while during their pregnancy, and they would go to school there. Some of them would go home, but a lot of them would go there and go to school and get their GED and stuff like that. And after they had a baby, then they would go back to the regular public schools. Okay, I'm not saying this system wasn't successful. I think it was very successful because I've known and did know young women who went through the Stevenson Building and went on to college and become very prominent women. But then I've seen like 65%, I'm going to say more than that, okay? I'm going to say about 90% of these women went into the streets, right? You know what I'm saying? Got into crime, because during that time, the crime thing, because guys come out of Vietnam, it became a market for the young drug entrepreneur that went out there and started using the GA these Vietnam vets was giving them, right, to buy drugs, right? And they got this money, and this is how a lot of the stuff started. And these young girls took hold to these young men. Okay, man, all these guys was in high school. This is in Detroit, right? Some in junior high school, and they became a criminal element in these societies, right? And they tend what they tended to do, what they wound up doing was they created a social atmosphere of uneducated young adults, right? Because when they were teenagers, they became young adults. I'm talking about, when I mean by young adults, once they became 17, 18, 19, and 20, right? I consider them young adults because they're not children. We consider them children, but they're young adults because a lot of them could do a lot more things than a person, a lot more responsible than a 50-year-old, a lot more responsible than a 30-year-old. They was buying cars, they was buying houses, they was investing in this and this and that. They was doing this. They was doing a lot of different things, right? But it was on a criminal element. So you get these women doing this, and as they did this, they had kids, and they taught this to their children, and in turn, their children taught their children not to trust men. There's a big distrust of African American men. All the thing I'm saying that most African American men, what we need to do is to, and I'm not saying that don't talk to your woman, don't talk to your wife. We need to learn to communicate with each other, right? We need to learn to sit down and communicate. The biggest lesson to be a man, number one, we shouldn't be arguing. Women argue, right? Men solve problems. You understand? We as men are supposed to sit down and talk. The difference between a woman's behavior and a man's behavior is the outcome of the conversation. A woman gets mad, she gets violent, right? She teaches behavior, or the child grew up seeing the behavior and think this is acceptable. And that male child grew up thinking that this is what men do. Men is not supposed to be that way. Men are not supposed to be violent people at all. Men are supposed to be very understanding. Men are supposed to sit down and talk about things and hash things out. Men don't run out and to get a gun and start shooting. We know what men do? They go to war. They get it fast, they go to war, right? They don't be going, okay, run over here and do this, shoot this guy, shoot that. No. That's not a reason, okay? And a lot of stuff is perpetuated by women. This guy did this guy did. Instead of the man trying to figure out, okay, what did you do? What image or what did you portray to this person to make him respond the way he did to you? You have to be thinking, right? We have to gain control of how our women display themselves in society, and like I say, there's a lot of women going like, this. Well, there's a lot of women out there do not want to lose control of what they have. Now, in the European society, I've discovered, right, that the European man will listen to a lie from a European woman, you understand, and perpetuate that lie to their children, to the fact that they stay in power. There's a lot of things going on in European society is under the false pretense of a history, right, that never existed, that was told to the children based on a direction they wanted their culture and their society to go. In the African American community, our culture has been steered by women. Now, don't get me wrong. I want you to think that I feel that women is insignificant. I don't think that. I think women plays a very big part in the human, understanding and in the lives of our culture and our societies. But I'm just saying is that we're not talking about them women. We talk about women who are evil and spiteful, right? And you talking about, and you may think this is a large number, but you can't. Okay, I'm gonna say 65%. Okay, I'm gonna say 85% of the women that's, you know, now I'm not talking about out of all the women in the world. Okay, I'm talking about these small areas, right? 85% women in these small urban communities. Okay, so you talk about, we're not talking about like 85% of a million. We talk about 85% of 1,000. You see what I'm saying? So don't think that I'm putting everything on a larger scale. I'm not. I'm putting on a small scale, right? It's okay. Out of these 3,000 people, 85% of them are doing this. You understand? Just like some people think that all African Americans are criminals and they trifling. They can no, okay. There's less than 1%, right? We talk about like 0.0000001% of African Americans on Earth are involved in criminal activity. You understand? The percentage is so small, the fact that the world would never notice unless the news media keeps pointing at this small group, right? You know what I'm saying? And saying this is a problem. Okay? That's like having 1,000 apple seeds, right? And you pulling one apple seed out and saying, this apple seed's the problem. Okay? You understand? And throw it back into the bag apple seed and say, you know what? All these apple seeds are bad. You got me? Okay. So anyway, I'm gonna end the discussion, right? Like I say again, I don't know how YouTube is gonna factor in the fact that, me talking over 25 minutes or. So this is your man Nicholas Shephard of Shephard Enterprise, giving you ideals, giving you knowledge, and giving you some type of understanding, so that maybe it would change your mind or change your whole perception. Okay, so that you can make a change, so that we can create a better and stronger economic base in the communities in which we live. This is Nicholas Shephard of Shephard Enterprise, Business Administration, Information System Consultants. I love you all. Peace.